Have you ever poured everything you had into someone you loved, only to find out they didn't even think to save you a seat at the table? I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a registered nurse, most of them in the cardiac unit at a hospital in Columbus, Ohio. I've held the hands of strangers at 2 in the morning. I've watched people take their last breath. I've also watched people fight back from the edge when everyone else had written them off. So when I tell you I am not a woman who cries easily, I want you to understand what I mean by that. I did not cry when my husband left. I did not cry when I had to sell the house we'd built together and move into something smaller. I did not cry when I worked double shifts for 4 years straight to rebuild what he'd taken with him when he walked out the door. But I am getting ahead of myself. My daughter is 34. She has her father's eyes, and for a long time, I thought she had my backbone. She was sharp, driven, the kind of woman who made lists and crossed things off before other people had even found a pen. She'd always dreamed of opening a restaurant. Not just any restaurant, a Southern comfort food place, the kind with real cast iron and sweet tea that actually tasted like something. She'd been talking about it since she was 22, sketching menus on napkins, saving recipes in a binder she kept on her nightstand. I believed in that dream. I believed in her. Her husband is a different story. They got married 6 years ago. He was charming at the wedding, I'll give him that. The kind of charming that makes you smile while something in your gut says pay attention. I paid attention. I noticed the way he talked over her at dinner. I noticed the way he'd say we decided about things she'd clearly decided alone, as if he needed to attach himself to her ideas to make them real. I noticed how her calls to me got shorter after they moved in together, how she started checking with him before answering simple questions. But she loved him, and I loved her, so I kept my observations to myself, and I kept showing up. About 2.5 years ago, my daughter called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember it was a Tuesday because I'd just come off a night shift and I was still in my scrubs, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. She said, "Mama, I think I'm finally ready to do it. I want to open the restaurant." My heart did something it hadn't done in a long time. It lifted. She had a location in mind, a building in a neighborhood in Columbus that was starting to see new businesses move in, foot traffic picking up, young families. She'd already talked to a commercial real estate agent. She had a concept, a name, a rough budget. She needed $280,000 to get the space, do the build-out, cover equipment, licensing, permits, working capital for the first 6 months. I had $300,000 in savings. Everything I had. 31 years of double shifts and packed lunches and driving a car until the wheels nearly fell off. Every dollar I had ever set aside instead of spending. I said yes before she finished the sentence. Now, I want to stop here for a moment, because I know what some of you are already thinking. You gave your child your entire life savings? Yes, I did. And I want to explain something. I didn't do it because I was naive. I did it because I had spent a career watching people run out of time. I had watched people die with regret on their faces. Not regret about the things they'd done, but about the things they hadn't. I was 61 years old. I was healthy, thank God. But I also knew that money sitting in an account doesn't mean much if the people you love never get a chance to build something real. So yes, I said yes. But I did not say yes the way you might say yes to lending someone your umbrella. I called an attorney. I had the attorney draw up an investment agreement, not a gift agreement. An investment agreement. The document was specific. It outlined exactly what the $280,000 was for and what it was not for. It specified that my daughter and I would have joint signing authority on any expenditure over $1,500. It required monthly financial reports, actual profit and loss statements, sent to me no later than the 15th of each month. It included a milestone clause. If the restaurant had not reached a defined revenue threshold by the end of month 9 of operation, the agreement would trigger a review, and I would have the right to request a seat on any formal business decisions going forward. It stated clearly that the ownership structure, 70% my daughter, 30% held in conditional trust, would only fully transfer to her once all milestones were met and all terms honored. My son-in-law sat across from me at my kitchen table when I walked him through it. He smiled that smooth smile of his and said, "This is a lot of paperwork for family, don't you think?" I smiled right back at him. I said, "That's exactly why we need it." My daughter signed, he signed, my attorney notarized it. We were official. The next 18 months were some of the most energizing of my life. I went with my daughter to look at commercial ovens. I sat with her while she interviewed line cooks. I tasted 17 different versions of her cornbread until she got the recipe exactly where she wanted it. I helped her pick the paint color for the dining room, a warm cream with dark wood trim that made the whole space feel like Sunday afternoon. I was there every step. Her husband helped too in the beginning. He handled some of the contractor negotiations, which I appreciated. He had a confident way of talking to people that got things done faster than they might have otherwise. I noticed, though, that he started referring to my restaurant in conversations. Not our restaurant, not her restaurant, his. I filed that away. By the time they were 2 months from opening, my daughter and I were on the phone almost every day. She was exhausted and excited in equal measure, and our conversations had that good kind of weight to them, the kind where both people know something real is being built. I told her I was planning to take that whole opening week off. I had already requested the days. I wanted to be there for the soft opening, the staff training dinner, the first Saturday service, all of it. She said, "Of course, Mama. We couldn't do any of this without you." I believed her. The call came on a Wednesday morning. I'd just gotten back from my morning walk. I didn't recognize the number at first. It turned out to be a new cell phone my son-in-law had recently switched to. I picked up. He said, "Hey, just wanted to give you a heads up. The soft opening went great." I stood in my kitchen and I heard the words, but I couldn't quite make them sit right in my head. I said, "I'm sorry, the soft opening." He said, "Yeah, we did it last Friday. It was great, really packed, food was excellent, she was amazing." I said, "Last Friday." He said, We kept it small, close friends, immediate family, you know how it is. We didn't want it to be overwhelming." There was a silence. I believe it lasted about 4 seconds. Then I said very calmly, "I wasn't invited." And he laughed. He actually laughed. That easy, dismissive laugh that meant he had already decided this conversation wasn't a problem. He said, "I mean, it was really just the inner circle. We'll do a bigger thing once we're fully open. You can come then." The inner circle. The woman who handed over her life savings was not in the inner circle. I asked to speak to my daughter. He said she was busy with prep. I said, "Tell her to call me when she has a moment." I hung up the phone. I sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where I had signed that agreement, where I had slid a check across to my own child, and I sat very still for a long time. My daughter called 4 hours later. She sounded tired. She started with, "Mama, I know," and I let her talk. She said it had been hectic. It came together fast. He had handled the invitations. She had assumed he'd called me. She felt terrible. I asked her one question. I said, "Did he tell you not to invite me?" There was a pause that told me everything. She said, "It's complicated." I said, "Okay," and I meant it. Not okay as in fine. Okay as in I hear you, and I understand more than you think I do, and I love you, and I am going to handle this carefully. We got off the phone. I poured myself a glass of water. I pulled out the folder where I kept my copy of the investment agreement. I read through it one more time, even though I had nearly memorized it by that point. Then I called my attorney. I was not done being calm, but I was done being quiet. 3 days later, 3 days, let that sit for a moment. My son-in-law called me again. Same new number. Different tone this time. He said, "Hey, we've run into a little cash flow issue. The equipment supplier invoiced earlier than expected, and we've got a gap. We need about $22,000 to cover it, and we were hoping you could wire it this week." I said, I'd love to help. Can you send me the invoice and the most recent P&L statement? Silence. He said, the what? I said, the profit and loss statement, the one that's due to me by the 15th of each month per the agreement. I haven't received one yet. He said, we've been busy. We just opened. I said, I understand that completely. I'm going to need the statement and the invoice before anything can move forward. That's what we all agreed to. His voice changed. That easy charm went somewhere. He said, this is getting ridiculous. It's family money. It's a family business. I said, you're right, which is exactly why we put everything in writing. He hung up. My daughter called 20 minutes later. She sounded different this time, not tired, but shaken. I could hear it. I said, sweetheart, I need you to listen to me very carefully, not as someone who is upset with you, but as the person who loves you most in this world and has a legal agreement that I take seriously. I told her that I needed the monthly financials. I told her that once I received them, I would review the cash flow situation and determine what options were available under the terms we had all signed. I told her that nothing about this was personal. This was the agreement we made. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, he's been handling all the financial stuff. I don't actually have the login to the accounting software. I want to pause here and tell you that what I felt in that moment was not anger at my daughter. It was something colder and more clarifying than anger. It was the recognition of a pattern I had been watching develop for 6 years, finally showing itself in full. I said, baby, that needs to change today. She said, I know. 2 weeks went by. I did not wire any money. I did receive eventually a set of financial documents, not formatted the way the agreement required, but enough to read the story they were telling. And the story was not good. Spending in the first 8 weeks of operation was running 34% over the approved budget. There were vendor invoices I had never seen before, for amounts that required joint authorization under our agreement. My son-in-law's name appeared on several of them as the sole approving party. I called my attorney again. We had another conversation, and then I sent a formal letter, not an email, a certified letter, to the business address of the restaurant, addressed to both my daughter and her husband as cooperators. The letter cited specific clause numbers from the investment agreement. It noted the misreporting deadline. It noted the unauthorized expenditures. It formally invoked the milestone review clause, which, given that the restaurant had been open for less than 2 months, meant that the conditional ownership trust had not yet transferred. It requested a meeting within 14 days. My son-in-law called me within 2 hours of that letter being received. He was not using his smooth voice anymore. He said this was a betrayal of family trust. He said I was trying to control their lives. He said I had no business involving lawyers in what was supposed to be a family arrangement. I said, we made it a business arrangement when we signed the agreement. I was very clear about that at the table. He said, you knew she would sign anything you put in front of her. I said, she's a grown woman who read every page. So did you. He hung up again. He's a big fan of hanging up. The meeting happened 12 days later. My daughter came. Her husband came. My attorney came. I came. We sat in a conference room and we went through the agreement line by line, and I want to tell you that my daughter who I raised, who I worked double shifts for, who I handed my whole savings to, she sat across that table and she did not look at her husband. She looked at me, and at one point when my attorney was walking through the unauthorized expenditures, she said, quietly, but clearly, I didn't know about those. Her husband said, you signed off on everything. She said, you told me they were in the budget. That was the moment the room changed. We reached an agreement at that meeting. My son-in-law would be removed from any financial authority over the business. My daughter would regain sole operational control. A proper accounting firm would come in and do a full reconciliation. The monthly reports would be delivered on time, every month, no exceptions, and the ownership structure would remain in its current conditional state until the milestone targets were met. He didn't take it quietly. He threatened to contest it. My attorney reminded him politely that he had signed the document and that contesting it would be both expensive and unlikely to succeed. He went quiet after that. My daughter walked me to my car after the meeting. It was a gray October afternoon, the kind where the air smells like leaves and cold coming. She grabbed my hand in the parking lot and she said, "Mama, how did you know?" I said, "I didn't know anything for certain. That's why we put it in writing." She said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I looked at her. My girl, the one I had stayed up with through ear infections and heartbreaks and every hard night that came, and I said, "You don't have to be sorry to me. You just have to know your own name on a document means something." She nodded. She understood. That was 8 months ago. The restaurant is still open. The food is still good. I can tell you that from personal experience because I have had a standing Sunday lunch reservation since the week after that meeting. My daughter runs it. It's hers. The numbers are improving, slowly but honestly, and the monthly reports now arrive in my email inbox on the 14th of every month without fail. Her husband is still in the picture, which is her choice, and I respect it. He stays out of the restaurant's finances. He has learned, it seems, that some agreements don't bend just because you hang up the phone. I'm still a nurse, still working, though I've cut back to 3 days a week. I like it that way. I have more time for Sunday lunches now. Some people have asked me if I regret it. The whole thing, the investment, the attorney, all of it. I tell them no, and I mean it completely. Not because it was easy. It was one of the hardest years of my life. But because the agreement didn't just protect my money, it protected my daughter. It gave her something to stand on when she needed solid ground under her feet. That's the thing about putting things in writing. It's not about distrust. It's about making sure that when the pressure comes, and the pressure always comes, everyone knows exactly where they stand, including the people who thought they could just hang up the phone and make the contract disappear. I think about that parking lot a lot. That gray October afternoon, my daughter's hand in mine, her asking me how I knew. The truth is, I didn't know. I never know exactly what someone will do when money enters the room. What I did know, what 31 years of night shifts had taught me, is that the people who love you clearly will still disappoint you sometimes, and the people who resent you quietly will show you exactly who they are the moment the pressure arrives. My son-in-law showed me who he was in stages. The way he laughed when I mentioned the paperwork, the way he started saying, "my restaurant," the way he hung up the phone instead of answering a straightforward question. None of it was subtle. I just had to be willing to see it. That's the part nobody talks about. Seeing clearly is a choice, and it costs something. It's easier to tell yourself the family is fine, the love is enough, the handshake is as good as a signature. I've watched people make that choice in hospital rooms too. Avoid the hard conversation, delay the difficult decision, wait until waiting is no longer an option. It never ends well. Clarity, even when it's uncomfortable, is always kinder in the long run than the story you tell yourself to get through the week. My daughter is the one I think about most when I sit with all of this. She is smart. She has always been smart. But intelligence without the willingness to use it on the people closest to you is just potential sitting in a drawer. She knew something was wrong long before that conference room. She knew when she didn't have the login to her own accounting software. She knew when she couldn't answer my simple questions without checking with him first. The moment she sat across that table and said, "I didn't know about those," that was not a revelation. That was permission. Permission she finally gave herself to say out loud what she had already understood for months. I don't say that to be hard on her. I say it because I recognize it. I have done the same thing in my own life, with my own people, in my own rooms. We all have. The question is never whether you'll face a moment that asks you to stand on your own 2 feet. The question is whether you'll do it before or after the damage is done. What I did, the attorney, the agreement, the certified letter, none of it came from bitterness. It came from something I had spent a long time building inside myself. The understanding that love without structure is just sentiment, and sentiment alone does not pay vendors or protect futures. I loved my daughter too much to hand her money with nothing around it. I respected her too much to pretend the risks weren't real. And I'd worked too hard for too long across too many difficult years to let someone else's entitlement dismantle what I had built. not out of stubbornness, but out of the simple knowledge that I had earned the right to be taken seriously. That's what I'd want anyone to take from this. Not the drama of it, not the satisfaction of watching a contract hold up in a conference room. Just this: do the right thing before you need to. Build the structure when the relationship is good, not when it's already breaking. And trust yourself enough to follow through when the moment arrives, even when the person sitting across the table is someone you would do anything for. Especially then.